James Ivano is an international speaker, author, coach, and an inspirational leadership strategist. What sets him apart is his 25-year journey as a sea captain. His passion for helping people inspired him to write his first book, Wisdom from the Sea, which chronicles his tales of adventure at sea in the context of leadership. James has had diverse experience in the business world, is a certified life coach, and he has conducted trainings on emotional intelligence and creative leadership in over 40 cities. James knows that the slightest deviation can take you off course and prevent you from reaching your goals and destination. Welcome, Captain James Ivano.
Come on, everybody, get up. We're going to have some cheerleaders here going to help us get you all motivated right now. Come on. Let's get that energy up. We used to do this on the boat all the time. That's it. Thank you, ladies, so much. High five. Okay, turn to the people, turn to the person to your right now and give them a high five and say, this is your year. This is your year. Woo! Good, good. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. Can you hear me in the back? Wave if you can hear me. Okay, good, good. I watched in amazement as a 300-foot barge crossed my bow. I'd been sleeping just seconds before that. My deckhand came down and he grabbed me by the shoulder and shaking me. He says, Cap, get up. We got a boat coming at us and I don't know what it is. So what are you talking about? He said, a boat just went by us and there's another one coming right at us and I can't tell what it is. It only has one green light. And for the mariners in the room in Idaho, I said, what did the other boat look like? He said it had 3 white lights, one above the other. And we all know that that is the configuration for nighttime travel for a tugboat under tow with a barge. And I went running up in the wheelhouse, and right off the bow was the cable slapping on the water, to which was attached the barge. And I threw the boat into hard reverse, and I firewalled it, and I was going backwards, and it felt like the back of that boat was going to shake off. I watched as this 300-ton piece of steel silently glided by my bow. My heart was pounding, and I turned and looked at my buddy, my lifetime friend Steve, who was my deckhand, and I felt like strangling him. But I didn't, because I put him on the wheel. You see, I'm very big on empowering people and holding people accountable and helping them step up to that next level in life. This is just another mishap in the string of many. And, you know, I've been in 70 to 80 knot winds, 30 to 40 foot seas, and I've been stuck outside of bars, entrances to harbors for days at a time, unable to get in. It was a crazy life, and I've seen plenty of storms in my life, and tonight we're going to talk about storms. I've gained a lot of lessons from being at sea, so I wrote a book called Wisdom from the Sea. And we all have storms in our life. It might come in the storm of the lost relationship, the storm of an unexpected illness or death in the family. It might be the storm of financial upheaval, but one thing I learned as a captain of 25 years is that storms keep coming. And the storms at sea are much like the storms on land. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about storms and how we can deal with situations when change comes upon us. And I'm going to talk to you about accountability and empowerment and how we can empower others around us. And we're going to talk a little bit about servant leadership. So buckle in, put on your life preservers, and hang on, because we're going to go on a little sea journey. But before we go down before we set sail, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm fourth generation commercial fisherman, and I come from a family of Scandinavians, all the way back to Viking days. We fished for a long time. And my dad moved out from Wisconsin in the early 60s. And his brothers also moved out, and the family was back there. They had been fishing on Lake Superior for decades. But they knew they needed to do something to move forward in life, something that was sustainable long term. So they moved out to the West Coast, and it was a robust time to be in Crescent City, California. The logging and the fishing was off the hook. It was a great lifestyle and a great place to grow up. I remember the first time I went fishing on that boat, the Seabird, 38-foot little salmon trawler, when I was 6 years old. And I remember that boat rocking back and forth, and I'm sitting there right on that hatch where that bucket's at. And I was sitting there, and I still remember the waves and the whitecaps and how that boat was surfing down the face of the waves. And I was scared. I was nervous because it was new to me. But every time there was a thump or a bump or anything going wrong, my dad was on it like that. And I learned a lesson that day. I felt safe. I felt good. And I learned that lesson that we all have something in our life, someone or something that makes us feel safe. It's our North Star, it's our anchor, it's that immovable object that makes us feel safe. And that was validated again that night when we got in, and I still remember walking across that parking lot with my little shaky 6-year-old legs trying to find my land legs, walking like a crab. And once again, my father was there to help guide me to the pickup truck. And I remember driving home that night and going through the front door of our house, and my sweet angel mother was in there cooking goulash. We ate a lot of goulash in those days. That was a main staple in our family because Dad was saving up to buy a bigger boat. That's the way it was done. So every time I smell goulash, I think of my sweet angel mother, and I think of the times in Crescent City growing up, and it was a safe time. It was a time where we could walk around as children and nobody would cause us any harm. It was just a great place to grow up. We didn't have a lot of money, but one thing we did have was a lot of unconditional love. And my mother gave us that. And it's a good thing because me and my brother were a bunch of knuckleheads, my brothers. I had 2 older brothers. I'm the good-looking one at the bottom. The one in the red, his name's Damien. Well, see, he was diagnosed with dyslexia as a child, and to him all words were backwards, so he was never religious because he couldn't understand why he should worship a dog. I know, right? And here he is now. Well, that's not now. He's actually in the Bering Sea. He's the only one in the family still fishing. And I called him this morning and said, hey, I'm going to be talking about you today in this talk. Are you good with it? He says, oh, that's awesome, man. I don't think he knew what I was going to talk about. But isn't it funny how you can wear a costume as a kid and you grow up as an adult and that's your alter ego? You guys seriously a pirate. Seriously, I had great parents. And I know a lot of us did. And Dad was a disciplinarian, and my mom was a very nurturing woman. That's my little sister, Lisa, sitting next to them. And, it was just a great time. It was a great way to grow up. Mom and Dad both had their sayings. Dad would say things like, stick and stay and make it pay. Pretty macho, right? Then he'd say things like, I was a young captain, I'd be like, Dad, I need another draw. And he said, he'd point to the Pacific Ocean. He'd say, go take a draw from the bank of the Pacific. Very manly sayings. Mom had her own sayings. She'd say things like, you get more flies with honey than you do vinegar. Or she'd say, it takes a real man to walk away from a fight. I used that one a lot in high school. Worked well for me. Oh, yeah. But my favorite was, you need to eat your vitamins. Nobody likes a short man. I ate my vitamins. Hey, she was right on the bees and the honey, right? What else can you ask for? But really, seriously, it was a great way to grow up. A disciplinarian and a culture woman that taught us about the arts. We were different than a lot of kids. We knew about literature. We knew about oil painting. She was an excellent oil painter. We knew about classical music. It's just an interesting way to grow up. I remember the first time I went fishing at 11 years old, offshore tuna fishing with my dad. My brother Donnie was 13, I was 11, and we went 700 to 1,000 miles offshore. I mean, think about that for a minute. Here's a guy with a brand new 56-foot steel boat, and he takes 2 kids offshore. Either he wanted to get rid of us, or he's really tight for cash. I have no idea. I thought about that more later in life, because when he went to take a nap, we were at the top of the mast all the way to the deck. That was our summer camp. That was our Little League. We were different than a lot of the kids in town. It was just a great way to grow up in those years, growing up with a lot of young fishermen in a household that were growing up in our formative years learning discipline and work ethic. So Dad was an interesting man. He was the kind of guy that didn't settle for less. He didn't want to, they tried to put him on a limit on what he could bring to the dock, and he decided to build his own crab processing facility, expanded out to fish and a lot of different things, but he ended up with, in an 8-year period, 2 seafood restaurants, a fish processing facility, 4 big boats, a fleet of trucks, and 150 employees. Incredible, right? The real incredible part of this story is that he was a 9th grade dropout, and he enlisted in the Marines and went to Korea. And I think that's where he really learned discipline and learned his work ethic. So we grew up in that environment. If you've ever been around a serial entrepreneur, it's insane. And that's how I grew up. So Dad was one of those guys, and it was a rough life. It was not easy, because we were the ones that were always out fishing when the other men were sitting in town tied up in safe harbor. We were grinders. We were highliners. We did what we had to do to get it done. It was just a great time in my life. Now, this is one of our boats. It's called the Frank and Maria. It's a 90-foot shrimp boat from the Gulf. And you tow a net off each outrigger. And these are machines. They're shrimp catching machines. And I have a story to tell you that happened to me in my personal life, because when I'm talking about storms, storms come and storms go. But I had my first real personal storm happen to me on April 4th, 1987. It was a beautiful day. It's a day that any of you would want to be a fisherman. We're making tons of money. It was flat calm. The sky was blue and the water was bluer. The seagulls were flying around eating the small fish as we threw them out of the shrimp. They're having a feeding frenzy. It was a beautiful day, massive bags of shrimp. Now this is the pink cocktail shrimp, the pink shrimp that you get in the shrimp cocktails and shrimp salad. If you've never smelt the smell of that shrimp, it's the smell of money. But it's a sweet smell. And it's one of those smells that every April 1st we get to get back into the shrimp fishing. It was a great time. I had a great crew. And this was a special day because there were probably 35 to 40 boats fishing in this area, and there was shrimp everywhere. It was just insane. And my dad didn't have to be out there, but this was a special day because this is the first time he'd been fishing in over 2 years, because that small seafood processing business he started turned into a small monster. And he just wanted to get away from the phones. It was driving him crazy. So he was back on the water that day. And he's about full. He was still catching shrimp like he used to in the old days. My dad was a great fisherman. And so I wanted to get a photo of this boat because I didn't know if he'd ever go back on the ocean again. He was a made guy. I mean, he was done. He was on his way. And so this is the picture of the Miss Lisa. Now this is the boat that was my summer camp. It was a friend of the family. And it was named after my little sister, Lisa. And so I idled up to the boat, and I happened to have a camera on the boat. And for the young people in the room, there was no such thing as a cell phone in those days. Just saying, kind of dating myself here a little bit. I happened to have a camera, and I idled up to the boat, and I'm probably from here to that back wall, if not closer. And it was odd because I could hear them arguing. And there's profanity. And there was just something was going on that boat. And it was my dad and my nephew, Timmy. And Timmy was 19, and they were two-manning it. But they were about full, so they were heading in that night. But they were arguing. I thought, man, they're having a bad day over there. Something's going on. So I took the photo And this is the photo, and I started to idle away because I was going to stay out one more day, and you drift when you're shrimp fishing. And I was looking for it because I was dead tired. And so I idled away, and as I was starting to pull away from him, he got on the public radio and he said, "Hey, go to the secret radio. I want to tell you something." And we had a UHF radio, which is a group radio for our family. So I go to this radio, and I could barely hear him in the background. And I went back to the public radio. I said, "I can't hear what you're saying." He said, words that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. "Don't worry about it. I'll tell you tomorrow." All right. So I continued to idle away from him, and I shut down the boat, and I lay down on my bunk and went fast asleep. The next morning, I wake up about 5 a.m. in the morning to radio chatter, which was odd because you never start hearing radio chatter until 7 or 9 o'clock in the morning when the production starts coming on the boats. And I ran up in the wheelhouse, and I could tell something was wrong. My cousins were on this radio, and one of them was crying. And they just stopped talking. And I grabbed the mic, and I said, "What's going on, Larry?" And he said, "Are you sitting down?" And I don't know about you, but anytime somebody says, "Are you sitting down?" you're probably about to hear something pretty bad. And I said, "Yeah, I'm sitting down." And he said, "Well, Miss Lisa hit the rocks last night, and she capsized, and they found Timmy dead on the beach, and they can't find your dad." I looked at that radio in shock. I walked down the 3 steps into the galley back towards the crew's quarters, and I went back and talked to my first mate, Alfred, and I said, "Alfred," I told him what happened. He said, I said, "Can you take the boat home?" He said, "Yeah, Cap, I got it." I remember going into the bathroom and leaning against the wall, and I slid down to the floor, and as I sat down on the floor of that bathroom, I heard the engines rev up, and that boat headed towards home, and I knew that ride home was going to change my life forever. As you can imagine, it really affected my family. It affected the entire community, if not the West Coast of the United States. My dad was a very well-known man. And my main concern was Mom, of course, but I had my kids and my wife, and we tried to make the best of it. And I got a call from the Coast Guard about a month later, and the lieutenant said that, we did an investigation, and it was inconclusive. We don't know who was on the wheel. We don't know what happened, but we do know this, is the boat was 2 degrees to the northwest of the harbor. 2 degrees from that spot where they left you that night. On that dark and moonless night, 2 degrees was the difference between life and death. Dad turned up on the beach about 4 days later. Those were the longest 4 days of my life. So storms happen. Things happen in life. Life changes quickly. I was 27 years old. I'd given up going to college. I was the protege. I was the prodigal son. I was the one that was going to be in charge of the company. He had big plans for me, and I had big plans for myself, but all of that went away that night 32 years ago. And so now I talk about that story. Because change happens quickly sometimes, and we don't know when it's going to happen next. Don't worry about it. I will tell you tomorrow. Tomorrow may be too late. I wanted to keep his legacy alive. He worked so hard, and I worked alongside with him, and as did others, and we wanted to make this thing work. But after 3 years, something happened. Because when there's transition, things are changing all the time, and the egos started to flare up, and people started to get weird. They started to embezzle, they started to lie, started to cheat. They were positioning for power. It was a toxic situation to the point where my mother had so much stress that we decided to sell the business. And that was a sad day. So I went about my business. I bought another boat, and I made it another 9 years in the fishing industry. And I was sitting on anchor one day, and I thought to myself, you know what? I did a lot of introspection, a lot of self-development type stuff, started reading a lot of these different thought leaders, and I realized something is that I was simply a character in my dad's book. I was simply just a character in his play. I decided I wanted to do something different with my life. I wanted, something with more stability, something with more certainty. I wanted to be home with my kids at night, and I just wanted to, I picked a job that I was certain would give me all those things, so I became a mortgage lender. What was I thinking? Seriously, I'm sitting there in Crescent City, jump on this boat. I take off for Seattle. I'm driving up the coast, and I get up to Seattle, and I meet a boat broker at the dock. Here with me. Thanks, Jeff. Yes. And I give him the keys to the boat, and I take a cab to the SeaTac airport, jump on a 737, and I fly to San Jose. How do I look, Jeff? Am I good?
Really good.
How is this hair? Hair's good? Thank you. Transition's important, right? We got to look good. We got to look good. So I fly to San Jose, and I get down there, and literally the next day I'm standing in a Century 21 office as a mortgage lender's assistant. Now, I knew what mortgages were, but I didn't really know a lot about it. And I didn't have nice clothes. I had my Marion Barry clothes. And all these guys were dressed like GQ, man. I'm just like a fish out of water. And one day I was standing back by the copy machine, making copies. You guys probably remember that bit off Saturday Night Live with Rob Schneider, right? The Rich Meister, remember that one? Steve Areno, Steve and Sandy, the Sandster, making copies. Remember that? That was me. Little did I know, man. I saw this cartoon, I thought about this. This is so what happened. The good news is I got you a TV gig. The not so good news is it's for Shark Week. You want to talk about a lot of sharks? I mean, I've seen a lot of sharks in my life. That real estate business, whoo. Any realtors in the room? Good. I had more stress as a mortgage lender than I ever had in my life as a fisherman. And I was in some crazy weather, challenging situations. It was just one of those jobs. It was so foreign to me, but I did it. I made the commitment that I would do this. I would make this transition because I needed to build my own legacy. Because when change happens, sometimes we have to do things that other people don't want to do. Who in this room is willing to step up and step out and do the things that other people aren't willing to do? That's transition. I traveled from Crescent City to San Jose for the better part of a year. Found out that my ex-wife didn't want to move down there. So we moved to Southern Oregon, and I started to practice there. Within 7 years, I had my own mortgage business. Man, I was on my way. Things were looking good. It's 2005, 2006, and 2007. About the fall of 2007, I went to work one day, and one of my buddies comes in there. He's one of those, highfalutin account executives for one of them B-paper lenders. I soon found out what B-paper really stood for. Yeah, he comes in one day and said, "What's going on, Joe? You look down." He goes, "Man, I am down." I said, "What's going on?" He said, "You didn't hear what happened to Bear Stearns last night?" I said, "No. What? What happened?" He said, "They went bankrupt. They shut down. They're laying everybody off, and my company's right behind them. I got laid off this morning." I looked at him and I was like, "Wow, man, sucks to be you." Who would have known? For anybody in the banking world, within 6 months I was backing a U-Haul up to the front of my office and loading the furniture up. I had no idea it could affect me. Second storm within 10 years. And I was down on the canvas looking up, and the champ was standing over me, and the count was going off, and I had to get back up. It was so hard to get off that canvas because I just wanted to quit. So I've had a lot of storms happen. I know we all have, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in this room that went through that very situation, and we have to really check our life and have to look back. So with that said, like I said, I wrote this book, Wisdom from the Sea, and I'm going to take you down a little a little journey here tonight to quantify this discussion. I put together a 3-letter acronym with the word C. And don't worry, because I know a lot about acronyms. As a matter of fact, I was just back at Yale University watching a commencement speech the other day, and the president of Yale University is up there, and he's using the word Yale as an acronym. So he starts out with Y, and he's like, blah, 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 and he goes about 30 minutes, and then he goes to A, and there's another 30 minutes went by. Right about then, the guy sitting next to me looks at me, and he says, man, good thing you didn't go to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. We'd be here all day. I wasn't really there. I won't do that to you, I promise. So S, set sail. One of the greatest lessons my father taught me while he's alive is that you can have any goal, any destination, any aspiration in life. And many people do, but sometimes they never release the lines from the dock. We have to move forward. And we're going to move forward in this conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about servant leadership as well. And I know there's a lot of people in this room right now that are high achievers, and you've done great things. We've got the ladies here from the LPGA. So honored to meet you, and I know that you've had your challenges, right? Yeah, and then Amanda Mackenzie was telling me that she had to take a break and she has a family now. So, and she's back at it. So it's very impressive. And sometimes we have to do what we have to do in life and move forward. So with that said, even though you're high achievers and you're catching the big tuna, there's a pretty good chance that you might have to push your boundaries a little bit more, right? Maybe you have to open up another branch. Maybe you have to do certain things to keep going, because what happens to rock stars or athletes that pull back? You're playing at the casino pretty quick, aren't you? That's right. You don't stay up there. You got to keep pushing forward, and you can't just stop. I caught those. Not really. Not really. But with that said, you must set sail, and to be exceptional, you must be the exception. We must push our boundaries. And I already asked you, who's willing to step up and stand out? Because sometimes we have to do things that other people don't want to do, and we must cut the ropes loose from the dock. That's step number one. I love to use metaphors in this talk because pictures tell 1,000 stories. And this is a very accurate photo of what it used to look like when I was fishing, and we'd have 40 boats in a half-mile circle in the fog. Big boats, towing 2 nets, like 8,000 pounds of gear on each side off of each pole, with cable about the size of the diameter of this clicker. It was heavy duty, it was heavy metal. And sometimes, radars are a great tool because you can find your way into a foreign harbor in the middle of the night. You can see ships in the fog. They're a great tool, believe me. But they do have their shortcomings. And this particular thing right here in the middle is called sea clutter. Now, sea clutter can be caused by birds, it can be caused by wind, waves. It could be atmospheric disturbances. It could be just about anything. The good news is the radar has a knob to tune it out. Wouldn't that be great? What do we have for sea clutter in our lives? What is affecting you right now? Could it be possibly something that's bothering you at home? Maybe it's something that's happening at work. Maybe you're not happy with your job. Maybe, just maybe, it's a cell phone. Maybe it's social media. We have so many distractions in our life today as opposed to 30 years ago. It's unfathomable. What we have to do to stay focused. So how do you reduce the sea clutter in your life? Second metaphor, the autopilot. And I have 2 different versions of this. The autopilot is a fantastic tool because if we're going offshore and we're steering 700 to 1,000, I've been 1,500 miles out north of Hawaii. And the autopilot's a great tool, otherwise we have to hand steer all the way for 7 days, and you don't want to do that, right? So it's a great tool. But again, it has its shortcomings. Autopilots can malfunction. Now you could be going along just fine and everything's going great, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're going in a circle. All right? So you have to pay close attention to the autopilot. The other version of the metaphor is all of us in this room, when we can first start thinking for ourselves cognitively, we have somebody telling us what? Dave? No.
I still hear that.
Yes. Well, I hear it too. You can't do that. What are you thinking? Are you crazy? We have other people, we're basically all programmed at some level, aren't we? We do. We have to think for ourselves. We have to think clearly. So the autopilot is a great tool, but again, when you're programmed, you want to make sure you're heading on the right course. Anytime you have a destiny, anytime you're going in any particular destination, I don't care what that is, because we all have different plans, different goals in life. It might be a retirement, it might be your vacation for the year. You know, the sad part is the United States has 50% of the people in this country are living paycheck to paycheck. It's a true stat. Most people don't have emergency funds put anywhere. Now, what I figured out when I was training and coaching, I'm still coaching people, is that it's a very common problem is some event happens in their life and they've been programmed, they did all the right things, they played by the rules, they did what they said they're supposed to do, and all of a sudden something happens and boom, they start going in circles. And when that happens, a lot of people can't get out of that fog. They can't get back on track. The last thing I want to talk about in this series is the Weather Fax Machine. How many people in here have heard of a weather fax? Great tool on a boat. Fabulous piece of equipment, because right about here is where I lived. And we'd fish out right about here, about 40 miles offshore. So this gave us a very clear idea of what was going to happen next. And so we're able to run for safe harbor, which a lot of people did. But we didn't, because we're crazy. And they might as well rename this thing to How Bad You're Going to Get Your Ass Kicked Machine. Because that's what happened every time. But at least you knew what was going to happen. So wouldn't this be great to have something in our life that we could tell was going to happen next? We don't have that, do we? We don't know what's going to happen next. The only real thing we can do is we can educate ourselves, we can do different things, we can prepare for the inevitable, but that's about all we can do. One of the things I teach my clients, how many people have heard of the 6 human needs? You probably heard of Maslow's needs, air, water, housing. This is different. This is, if you remember this will make a difference in your life that you'll remember forever. The first 4 things, certainty, uncertainty, and variety, significance, love, and connection. We're going to meet those one way or the other in our life, no matter what. That's going to happen, because the nervous system, you won't be able to function without meeting these needs in your life. Because, for example, certainty might be having a great retirement. Okay? Variety might be taking up skydiving when your kids are all out of the house, right? You want a little excitement in your life. Significance might be belonging to an organization and doing charity work or that type of thing. Love and connection might be in a loving relationship, but all of those first 4 can go the other way. People will find love and connection staying in a relationship with an abusive partner. It might be verbal abuse, it might be physical abuse. They'll stay in that relationship. Significance, people will join ISIS to go belong to a group because they have no significance in their life. And again, as it goes. The last 2, though, when we're talking about servant leadership, those are the 2 that I want to talk about tonight. I want to focus on these because growth and contribution are the 2 biggest things that most people don't do. These are voluntary. Now, I know from a fact from talking to Jared and Taryn and just everything that was happening with the people that were building the bunks next door at the hotel next door. People do a lot of good things, and I'm working on this part of my life. I'm really seriously putting more time thinking about what can I do next? How can I make a difference? Because servant leadership is really something we need to focus on. When my dad died, was that a story about death? Or was it a story about life? Because I think it was a story about life. It was a chance for me to step back and look at my radar and to tune out some of the sea clutter. It took a long time. Seriously, 30 years. 30 years later, I really realized how traumatic that event was in my life. Because some of us have that determination, we have that can-do spirit, right? Where we can make it happen no matter what. But it's okay to step back and admit it. And it took me 30 years later to really admit it. Again, check my autopilot, make sure what course am I on. I can't remember your name. Callie. Tally. And she asked me, so what do you do? And I said, I'm a speaker. And she said, well, so what else do you do? And the good news is, this is what I do now. But I still coach people. And I bring that up, and I didn't mean to embarrass you. I hope I didn't.
I'm not. I'm embarrassed a lot.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. It's good to know, Dave, right? Yes. So I'm doing something I enjoy doing now. And if you would have told me 30 years ago, or 20 years ago for that matter, that I would be standing up here tonight, I would have laughed at you. I never would have thought in a million years that I would be doing this for a living. So everything happens for a reason, doesn't it? Yes. So it brings us to E, and empowerment. Now, empowerment's one of those things that it's easy to be empowered for some people. Some people are just naturally empowered. But other people, it takes work. And the more I travel the country, the more I'm starting to see something that's very alarming. One of the most important pieces of equipment on the boat is the alarm system. When you're at sea, if you're 1,000 miles offshore, you need to stay on top of what's happening. But the most important alarm on there is the bilge alarm. Because when you have water coming in the boat, you need to get down there right away because you never know where that's coming from. It's one of the biggest concerns of any captain. I was in Florida a month ago. I've been all over the country. I keep hearing the same thing over and over again, is that there's a real problem in the United States of America right now, and that's finding people that want to work. And it's not just young people. The work ethic is leaving our society. And this is something that when we're talking servant leadership, when we're talking leadership in general, it's very important. All of us are leaders. I know there's some natural born leaders in this room right now. And maybe you've been holding back from taking that step and doing those things that make you feel uncomfortable. I'm going to tell you a story about a guy I had working for me named Vern. And I didn't really know Vern, but he's one of those high school athletes that was a White Star athlete. He was good at all sports. I hated that guy. No. But he got a free ride to university for football. And he went to a training camp, and then he found out that he wasn't as good as he thought he was. Matter of fact, he didn't even make the team. He ended up coming back home, and he started drinking. And I'd seen this guy around, but I didn't know him. And one day I was down on that boat that I showed you, the Franca Maria, and we're working at the dock. He comes walking up, and I said, "Can I help you?" He said, "I need a job." I said, "Well, I have a crew right now, and besides that, I heard you're a drunk." He says, "Yeah, I know, you probably heard that." But he says, "I had an epiphany. I cleaned up my act. I'm on the right track. Stone cold sober." I said, "I'm proud of you. That's good." But he said, "Let's check back in 6 months and see how you're doing, and we can talk. I don't need a crew right now." So he walked away, and I felt kind of bad for him. Went back to working on the boat. The next day, almost the same time of day, here he comes again. And I said, "What's going on, Vern?" We were getting the boat ready to go on dry dock and haul the boat out of the water to paint the bottom. And I said, I was super busy. And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I'm here for my job." I'm like, "I just talked to you yesterday." I said, "We don't have a place." And he turned around and walked away. So we go haul the boat out of the water. We're up on dry dock, and this boat's really high out of the water, as you can imagine. So we had one of those aluminum ladders, the sliding ladders, on the side of the boat. I was standing there talking to my crew and one of the boatyard guys, and you hear this rattle, 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 rattle. And I turn and look, and all of a sudden it's like, whoop! There's Vern, his head sticking over the rail. I go, "Vern!" I look at my watch, it's about the same time of day. I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm here for my job." I said, "You're not working here." He jumps on the boat. This is a true story. Goes back to the stern compartment, the hatch, jumps down into the stern compartment, and starts chipping rust with a hammer. And I go walking back there, and I look down in that hole. I said, "Vern, you're not working on this boat." And he looks up at me and he said, "Oh, yes, I am." What do you do with a guy like that? So I hired him. We made it work with stipulations. He couldn't drink, number one. Number two, had to show up to work on time. Not only did Vern not drink, not only did Vern show up on time, Vern had all the engines running 15 minutes before I got there, had coffee going, had all the electronics on. Vern took it upon himself to go through all the safety gear and started taking over the safety drills on the boat, which I had been conducting. Vern did everything. I didn't have to do a thing anymore. Now, was it me that changed Vern? No, it's just simply I pointed out to him something he knew he already had in him, but he couldn't get a shake. He couldn't get a chance. So I gave him that opportunity, and man, he shined. And Vern's he had 3 children, got married, had 3 children. And I trained him how to run that boat. Now Vern owns that boat. And Vern is one of the top highliners on the west coast of the United States, one of the top fishermen. And I took some empowerment that had been placed upon me and then placed it in him. And we all have that gift to be able to take somebody and give them those words of encouragement. It might be somebody that's got a dark patch in their life. They might be going through a hard time. But sometimes it's just taking people to coffee, and maybe it's somebody at your work. Maybe somebody in your church. They always seem negative. Maybe there's something that you can take them out and find out about. I'm just encouraging you and suggesting you might look at that. So with that said, how many people in life go through life and they never do anything? They never want to push forward. And how many people do you have in your life that are maybe placing negative words upon you? Or we've all heard, I don't know about you, but after that whole fishing thing, after the boat wreck and all that, I still have family that are living in those days. They're still dwelling on how they got ripped off or how something they should have got this, and they're living angrily. And that's why I figured God made caller ID. Unfortunately, sometimes you just don't want to answer that phone, right? But some people, if you're rowing a boat and you're heading towards a destination and you're rowing and rowing, the only person on that boat that can rock the boat is the person that isn't rowing. So if you have something going on in your life, doesn't matter if it's something or a person, you need to take whatever that is and throw it overboard. Or take them back to safe harbor and let them go back to a life of complacency and hang around with the people that don't want to achieve. How many people in here own horses? How many people have seen a horse? Tough crowd. All right, well, there's a proven fact. If you have a bad horse in a corral and you put a good horse in with a bad horse, you get a bad horse. The human condition, if you have a nursery and you put a healthy baby in with a sick baby, you're going to end up with a sick baby. So if you want to be healthy, wealthy, and on your way to greater things in life, you need to hang around people that are healthy, wealthy, and on their way to greater things in life. Sometimes we have to cut the lines loose from the drag that's dragging us down. Living a life with purpose, but living a life on purpose. Brings us to A, which is accountability. Now, I took a look at this word, and I wanted to split it up because it's such a big word. And I look at this, and I like doing this older again. I don't know about people that are getting older in the room, but I certainly take a look at words twice these days. This word is account, is looking back into the past. It's a record or narrative of past events. That's one definition. And ability is the quality of being able to perform. So that's kind of the future, isn't it? So you got one word that's in the past, and you got another word that's in the future, but the account part is the key to the future. Because we have to look back at how we handle different situations. We need to look back at we call it a tack when we're sailing or we're motoring somewhere. There's a tack line or a track line behind the boat. We need to look back down that track line and see how we handled situations and how can we improve ourselves and be accountable for the things that we might have did not 100% correct. And when it comes to other people that are under our guidance or our tutelage or whatever that looks like in your life, sometimes we have to hold them accountable. Again, I have another story of a young man, and this has nothing to do with Vern. This is like 20 years later. And I just love these stories. And this guy, his name is Ryan. I needed a greenhorn. You all know what a greenhorn is? How many people have seen The Deadliest Catch? Okay. You might have seen the episode with the greenhorn. If you don't know what a greenhorn is, let me show you what a greenhorn is. The guy wearing the funnel on his head and the tinfoil hat is a greenhorn. That's what they look like. Right there. Now there's actually a video out there of this guy. I can't find the video. I've been looking every time I go to do this talk. I saw it one time, but I found the photo. So what they did with this guy, he didn't know what he was getting into, I'm guessing, because most people that go on fishing boats don't know what they're getting into because it's a crazy life. So they wrap him in tinfoil and they tell him you have to walk over towards the marine store, and once you get halfway across the parking lot, you turn around, look at the boat, hold your arms up, and start doing jumping jacks. And then we'll turn on the radar and calibrate the radar. He does it in the video. Go check it out. Newport, Oregon greenhorn. I'm sure it'll probably pop up somewhere. I can't find it. With that said, I mean, that's not what you do. But my favorite thing was I would send deckhands, and it's kind of mean, right? In a way it's mean, but it's not really mean because if you're going on the ocean for 50 days with somebody and you have a tough situation, you want to know who you're dealing with, right? This guy obviously took he took it in jest. My favorite thing to do was to send new greenhorns or newbies, we called them, over to the marine store to pick up a gallon of prop wash. And so they'd say, oh, okay, and that's what greenhorns always say. And they start walking over towards and I'd be snickering with the other guys on the boat. They head over to the marine store, and I get on the cell phone and call over there. You got a live one coming in. 959er, we got a live one. All the fishermen hung out at that marine store. That's where all the BS happened, right? So this person would walk in, and they'd say, oh, I'm here to get a gallon of prop wash. Oh, yeah, it's right back there in the middle aisle down there in the third shelf down. And you walk back, and like, I don't see any prop wash back here. Well, for those of you that don't know what prop wash is, this is prop wash. Now, I see somebody finally wised up, and they actually started marketing prop wash in a gallon. I guess they scrubbed their propeller. Who scrubs their propeller? I don't know. Anyway, with that said, back to Ryan. So this kid, I walked to the boat one day, and here he's standing there. He's got basketball shoes on, gym shorts, basketball tank top. He's got his hat on, cocked sideways with the label still on the bill. I don't get that. I thought he was a tourist. I said, can I help you? And he said, I'm here for the greenhorn position. And I explained to him what that was, and it's a dirty job. You're going to have to do all the dirty jobs on the boat, and you're going to get paid a lot less than everybody else. You okay with that? And he said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, perfect. You fit the bill. He had a pulse. So I found out that his father, this guy, he had put himself, he was a chef at a steakhouse, which is always a great thing on a boat, believe me. And I found out that his father had hit his head in an ATV accident when he was about 12 years old. And I met his dad. His name's Rick. And Rick came down to the boat one day, and this is Rick and Ryan. And Rick was fine. You know, he just didn't work anymore. He's on disability. He had a little sport boat, and he went and caught fish all the time and drank beer. I mean, what is wrong with that life? I'm just saying. So we were getting ready to leave, and I got to know Rick a little bit. And we were there for about a week. And he came up to me, and he said, can you promise me one thing? I said, sure, what's that, Rick? Take care of my boy. He's a good man. I said, absolutely, Rick. I always take care of my men and women. And so we fast forward, we went fishing. 14 days into the 50-day trip we were on, fishing for tuna, Ryan comes up into the wheelhouse, and he's holding his hat, and his head's hanging down. He comes walking up into the wheelhouse, and he sits down, and I said, what's going on, Ryan? He said, Cap, I don't think I can take this. This is way more work than I thought it was. He was fine, believe me. I've seen a lot of people. He started doing the math on how much money he was making. It was raining and blowing. We weren't catching many fish, and he wanted to go home. I said, okay, Ryan, what do you propose we do? He said, I'd like you to take me in, sir. I said, Ryan, that's not going to happen. I said, it's 200 miles. That's a 2-day run. You want me to take you all the way to town and then all the way back out here? It ain't going to happen. He said, you have to take me in. Just like that, he snapped. I said, I don't have to do anything. Matter of fact, they call that mutiny where I come from. I said, we're not taking you in. I said, what I'd like you to do is I want you to go lay down in your bunk, and I want you to think about the fact you got your 2 shipmates back there, you got this boat, and you have me. We're all going to take a financial haircut and get out of sync with things so you can go sit on the couch. This is not going to happen, Ryan. And he stomped down the stairs, went and laid in his bunk. And I was sitting there in that chair, and I was thinking to myself, whatever happened to the days where people just committed and they followed through? And I don't know about industries you're in, but it's really getting hard to find people that are committed, that are accountable for their own life, that want to stick it out. And I got thinking, maybe that's what Rick was telling me. Maybe that's what Rick meant, is that, could you please make my son be accountable? Because he couldn't do it. Ryan had basically raised himself. So about an hour later, Ryan comes back up in the wheelhouse, and he says, I asked him, I said, what'd you decide, son? He said, well, I'm going to stick it out, Cap. I said, that's good, Ryan. I'm really proud of your decision. Little did he know I had 4 rolls of duct tape behind my seat, and we were going to duct tape them up and throw them in a closet for the next 40 days. But he made the right move. But something magical happened that day. Ryan changed. Ryan started getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and stacking tuna by himself in a 30 below freezer. I walked back in the galley one morning, and we always had coffee and what have you, and I said, "Where's Ryan at?" And they said, "Oh, he's down in the fish hole stacking fish." I said, "What are you guys doing here?" "Having our coffee." Ryan started cooking 4 square meals a day. He started taking wheel watches. He started doing all these things, and I didn't have to ask him to do anything. It's amazing to me. Did I change Ryan? I didn't change Ryan. I simply made him look at how he was behaving. And I gave him the chance to figure out what his why was. Because, the sad part is most companies and most people in this country don't know what their why is. They just go to work every day. They don't like their jobs. They don't want to be there. They're looking forward to Friday instead of Monday. And they're getting paid by the hour when, in fact, they should get paid for the value that they bring to that hour. And we have a problem in this country. And I'm blowing my horn wherever I go about it because, the cannabis thing just happened in Oregon and in California, in Washington State, and it's happening everywhere. And the more I talk to companies, I'm finding out they're dropping their zero tolerance policies. Who saw that coming? I mean, it's a severe problem. And the fishing industry is really, really in trouble because they won't work unless they can smoke on the boat. They think because they can smoke it in town that they can smoke it on the ocean. There's people driving boats around that are stoned out of their gourds. It's very frightening. So things are happening, and we need leadership. And I'm asking people to be accountable, to take that extra moment to go be involved in your church, in your community, in your schools, and whatever that looks like, and take young men and young women and lead them. We've got some leaders in the room right here. I know that's probably one of your focal points, right? Yeah, because we all need somebody to look up to. This lady, not to leave the ladies out of the picture, is a friend of mine, and just a quick story. I'm going to wrap up. But Kristen Smith actually went to the University of Idaho, and she also went to Oregon State. So we can both be proud of her. Kristen is a nuclear physicist, but she opted to fish. And she's a seiner out of Alaska. And I met her down in Ventura Harbor. I decided to go try squid fishing one time. If you ever go fishing, don't go squid fishing. There's plenty of other ways to make money. There's a nighttime fisheries, and I like my sleep. So what her job was, she had a light boat. And the way it works is it's a smaller boat, and they light the water up with these big, high-powered lights. That's all they do. And the squid will actually come up to the lights. And then the seiner, if you know what seiners do, they wrap a big circle, and then they purse it up. And then they'll vacuum the squid out of the net. It's just a fascinating thing to watch. But Kristen had a greenhorn on the boat, a young person that was brand new. And all their job was to pick the anchor up. That's all they do, and tie the boat up. And they made the mistake of not dogging off the anchor. And so she went to pull out of that net, and you have to drive over the cork line and get out of the floats. And she went to pull out of there, and the anchor had trickled back down and was hanging in the water, and it grabbed the cork line and spun the boat around, and she got the cork line caught in the propeller on her boat. Now, what would you do in that situation? You're looking, number one, it's probably $30,000 worth of squid in that net. She needs to get out of that net now. It's a bad situation, but not only that, the net could be damaged, it could be done, that boat could lose out on hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what does this gal do? Number one, somebody caught a great white shark like 2 days before, that 20-foot great white. They caught a 10-foot mako. This is an El Nino year, and the warm water, so there's all these exotic sharks. What does she do? She has a mask, just a mask. She dives in the water in the middle of the night in shark-infested waters to go cut that line out of the wheel. Does she need to be on the ocean? No. She could probably get a job doing a lot of other things. But the real interesting thing of this is there were 3 boats there, 80-foot boats with big bright lights lighting up the water around this boat. And here's this gal, and I saw her dive in 10 times. And I interviewed her the next day. She finally got it cut out. I said, "Why did you do it?" Kristen, and she said, it was my responsibility. I got that line, I got those floats in my wheel. It was up to me to get them out. 12 men watched her for the better part of 2 hours, diving down with a knife in her teeth, cutting the rope out of that wheel. See, Kristen doesn't choose to live in a mindset of, oh, I'm in a world of inequality. She doesn't buy into that. Now, I'm not saying the world's perfect, don't get me wrong. I'm saying she has a different attitude about life. She could be doing anything right now. So what's she do? She goes and buys that big red boat. She could be just happy sailing and catching her salmon, but she's tendering salmon now. Now she's packing salmon. Those men are her crew. So when it comes up to when you're challenged being in the boardroom, or you're challenged going to work and you're dealing with men and you're trying to punch through that glass ceiling, I want you to remember this, gal. Remember, it's possible. We all have what it takes to make things happen. It's possible. But you have to come from a place of possibility. Why is it some people can move forward in life and other people get hung up and live in a place of poor me and I can't do this? And don't get me wrong, I know there's a lot of people that have been abused to the point where they can't think out of that situation, but it could be as simple as we have had words spoken over us. And we've been put in a place where we need to really do that inner work. We need to really look at our inner self and try to find a way to deal with that. I do have some books here. I want to invite you to meet with us after the event's over if you'd like. I'll sign them for you. But I have a chapter in there about our inner self. It's called The Pirate Within, because sometimes that voice that we have, or maybe it's something somebody has said over us, has held us back in life. And we all have what it takes to get out of that, but we need to work at it sometimes. I saw this image, and I want you to look at this, because to me this sums it all up. Picture that anchor that is wrapped around the statue's waist. Picture a rope around your waist. Or maybe you got 3 of them. Maybe you have a dozen, and on the end of each one of those ropes there's an anchor, and that's a belief that you've had placed upon you. Believe me, I still have people telling me I can't make it, I can't do it. You're doing what? Are you crazy? You're speaking? People in the fishing industry don't even know what I'm doing. They would not understand what I'm doing, believe me. But I've had so many people, and the strangest part of it is, it's mostly my family. They get jealous when you start to make it, when you start to reach a level, and I'm just, at least this is my situation, I feel that there's a jealousy there. And you have to look back and you have to say, I'm going to cut the rope. And sometimes we have to let certain people go back away from us so we can think for ourselves. But the only way to get rid of these lines, we can cut them loose, but we have to have the knowledge, we have to have the wisdom, and that is your knife. We need to cut those ropes loose. I started a program called the 2-Degree Principle. I do coach people still. If you know anybody that's in that situation, at the bottom here, even if you don't know anybody, reach out to me, jamese360.com. You can find all of my information there. Go to my Facebook page, like it if you want to. Reach out to me, we'll become friends on Facebook, all that good stuff. I've got a lot of things happening, a lot of different things going forward. Every time we have an event happen in our life, every time we have a challenge, we're going to have 3 or 4 things come along with that, or 3 or 4 challenges come along with that event, and on the average. And we can look at those as lessons, or we can look at those as problems. But if we continue to see them as problems, they're going to become a reality. And we all know people that are living in that place where they've just bought into it, that is their reality. And for the most part, most of the problems, a lot of problems we have are made up. There's a great quote by Mark Twain, I used to have more problems than most men in the world. I've had more problems than most men in the world. Good thing for me, most of them never came true. Love that quote. So we have to bust through that. I lived a rough life. Fishing wasn't easy. And we all have storms. We'll all have challenges. And you know, as I go through my life and the more I talk to people and the more I get out there, the more I hear stories about people that have went through adversity, we all have what it takes to go through the storms in our life. We have that, and we need to stay focused on our destination. My question to you is, I truly believe that we are all born. Some of us have better chances of making it than others, maybe. Maybe we have assistance or whatever that looks like. But we all are vessels. And our soul is poured into that vessel. What does your vessel look like right now? Are the planks falling off of it? Is it rusty? Are there barnacles on the hull of your boat when you haul it out of the water? Are you being held back because of drag? Or does your boat look like a sleek $3 million king crabber? Good to go, heading on a destination, gliding through the water towards at full speed ahead, because we all have what it takes to move forward, but we have to look at our vessel. Sometimes we have to look at where we're at in our life situation. You know, my dad never thought he was going to die. I know that for a fact because his will wasn't in order, his affairs were not in order. I was a trustee for his company. We didn't know what to do with the business, didn't know what to do with all of his properties, or my mother for that matter. He didn't plan on dying that night. Don't worry about it. I'll tell you tomorrow. Tomorrow may be too late. 32 years later, I stand before you as living proof of that. And you know, one last short little story, I promise. I live in Bend, Oregon now, and I was out networking, and we're at an event, and I met this gal, and she's a realtor. She found out I was coach, and so we had coffee the next day. And she said, "You don't know me, do you?" I said, "No, I don't know you." She goes, "You know, I grew up in Crescent City." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, I worked at your dad's fish company." I said, "You're kidding me." 30 years later. She said, "Yeah, that was the greatest place I've ever worked in my life." She said, "I got behind on my mortgage one time, and I got behind on my power bill, and they're going to kick me out of the house. And I had a kid," and she said, "You know, I didn't know what to do, and I went to your dad, and he paid that mortgage for me. And he paid the power bill." And it's not the first time I heard this story. And she said, "You know, your dad was the kind of guy we'd be backed up at the end of the day, and he'd come down and he'd put his rain gear on and he'd help us." And I thought at that moment to myself, I thought, you know what, my dad was a servant leader. My dad was an example to others. And at his funeral, his celebration of life, people were saying great things about him, and they had stories about my dad, about the nice things that he did. So if you don't know what your destiny is and you're really curious about what to do next, maybe you're at that point of change in your life or transition, I encourage you to put yourself there at your celebration of life and to think, what would you want people saying if you could witness that? Because if you don't know your destiny, there it is. It's that simple. We all have things happen. You know, I have one quote by Mark Twain. It's 20 years from now, we're going to be more disappointed with the things we didn't do than the ones that we did do. So you need to cut the lines loose from the dock, sail away from safe harbor, hoist your sails, and let them fill full of the winds of empowerment and accountability and servant leadership. And sail off to those uncharted waters off your chart. And I will see you out there in the sea of life. I really appreciate you having me here today, and I've got a little prayer I want to share with you. And may the trade winds be at your back. May your bow respond when you need to tack. May you always catch your limit with your whole heart always in it. May your nets always be full with calm seas at your hull, so when you go through heaven's door, the rewards will never end, because you are the fisherman of souls, my friend. And don't worry about it. Just enjoy tomorrow and tell me about it. Thank you.
All right. Yes. What did you think of that? Wow. Cap. Amazing. Thank you.